I'm Mia Blum. I'm the co-chair of the Commission on Sustainability. Jared?
Yep, and I'm Jared Lyles, co-chair of the Sustainability Commission on Sustainability. So we'll get started in this meeting. I guess the first thing we want to do, let's see if we have everybody.
Grace, would you mind sharing the slides, because that has the meeting agenda for folks to see?
Yep, no problem. Let's see. Are you seeing that now, the presentation? Okay, perfect.
Well, yeah, so now that we've done our icebreaker question, I guess I'm going to kick it over to Ava. Give us some Sustainability Commission updates.
Jared, and good evening, everyone. Ava Richardson. I am the director for the Office of Sustainability. Thank you all so much for joining our September 2025 meeting tonight. We have a really great topic where we'll hear about updates on the city's process for creating our watershed master plan through the next few months. So Grace, if you could go to the next slide. I'll just share and walk through everything that we have on the agenda for tonight. So thanks for everyone for letting us know whether you were apple spice or pumpkin spice. And I gotta give a shout out to the ginger spices out there as well. My favorite spice of all time. Tonight the commissioners, they will be taking a vote to nominate one additional potential name to submit to the mayor to be a part of the new commissioners that we'll be recommending. And I think, Jared, do you want to do that now?
You know what?
I'd like
Was that
if it's
okay?
if you can go through your
updates.
updates. Yeah, thank you.
On the next slide, we'll just run through some quick updates from the Office of Sustainability. I will share that we have a couple of new interns in our office. We also want to announce the upcoming fall round of the Growth Centers hosted by the city's Department of Public Works. And as a reminder, the Growth Centers are really an opportunity to connect people to all aspects of our watershed, standing for green resources and outreach for watersheds. These are wonderful events that our team members support tabling at, along with other city agencies and community-based organizations. This month, we had three fellows join our team. 2 fellows from the Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps program. And I don't know, Eden and Ted, if you're on the call, but we're really excited to welcome them to our team. This is our second year in a row, having Climate Corps and Conservation Corps fellows in the office. And I think some folks probably remember hearing from our fellows at the end of their term last year. So I'll give an opportunity for Ted and or Eden to introduce themselves. If you don't mind coming off camera. Ted, I saw that you are here.
Yes, hi. Good to meet all of you. This is basically my first week here, but yes, I'm basically interning with the Chesapeake Climate Corps, so I'm attending this meeting to figure out what's going on and how I can best help. I've enjoyed it here so far. So, first of all, thanks for having me. Second of all, great to be here.
See him around town helping us do engagement at various events. Eden is not able to join. I think one of our other fellows from the University of Maryland, Jada, is not here tonight, but we do hope everyone gets a chance to interact with them in the future. So on the next slide, we want to let everyone know that our our annual sustainability report will be released soon, and we are going to be posting that on our website. And so please look out for that. We're really excited to share the 2024 updates, especially given everything that's going on in the first 9 months or so of this year. We want to highlight the positive progress that we've made in the past, and look forward to the future in terms of how we continue to plan and ideate around climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. With that, I'll pass it back to Jared to do the commission roll call and provide updates.
Looking here just to see if we had any new people pop in. So I'll do the roll call here. So Mia Blum,
Present?
Jared Miles, I'm present. Donzel Brown,
Present.
Phil Costa. I think you're here. I'll move on. If not, I see you're present in the chat. I'll count that. Lisa Pareto.
Present.
Okay, let's see. Inez Robb. I think I saw you earlier. Stephanie Smith. I see you there, Miss Robb. If you can just wave your hand, I'll that's present for me. All right. And then Stephanie Smith. Okay. All right. And then Morgan Grove. So I had a note that he might be joining a little later. I didn't see him come in yet. All right. Is there anyone else here who I might have missed?
Delegate Boyce is here unless I'm not on the commission anymore.
Okay, perfect. Put you down. I didn't recognize the number. Thank you. And then Nicolette Lussaint. Councilman reporter. Or Ben Zajcik. All right, so from that, I want to go ahead and move on. I guess we can talk about some of the meetings that we have planning to come up next month, and then we also wanted to put forward a vote for a new nominee to join the commission to put forward a new nominee as well. So on October 15th, it will be a virtual meeting, and we'll talk more about protecting vulnerable populations, where we'll have some really interesting guest speakers there. And October 19th, we will have presentations from commission members who are falling off the commission and who will talk about the things they've worked on during their time on the commission. And then finally, December 10th, we're hoping for an in-person legislative preview and sustainability networking meeting hosted at the headquarters of Visit Baltimore on December 10th.
That's a tentative option at this moment. So I think for that meeting, we need to just make sure, since it's not the third Wednesday of the month, that we have that move works for most commissioners, because that will be the second Wednesday of the month. So that's a proposed change. Any challenges for any commissioners? I also need to make sure that I can host that here. Lisa, that's a great question. Since we know that December gets to be very busy for everyone, does that time 4 to 6 work, or do we need to move the time as well? Okay. Thank you. Any other conversation from commissioners? Great, thank you. So commissioners, in your inbox, you would have received a resume that has been forwarded and approved by the nomination committee for consideration by the entire commission. I'd like to entertain a motion to recommend Alicia Johnson for commission so that we can put her forward with the other appointments.
Do I have to be on the committee to make the motion?
Just the commission. And you
Oh.
are. Is that what you're
Well, I
doing?
meant like the nominating committee of the commission. Okay, then I make the motion to accept Alicia Johnson as a new appointment.
Thank you. Any second?
Second. Second.
Thank you. And that's a second from Delegate Boyce. All right, and then we can just do a quick roll call vote. So just all in favor. Either it is easier for us if you put it in chat or raise your hand so that we can just get that everyone here has said aye. So thank you. So we have Stephanie Smith, Jared, Amy. I'm hoping that you're grabbing this. Donzel. Yeah. Phil says yes. Lisa says yes.
Yeah, as you read them off, then I am entering them in. It's helpful if you call them so that I don't have to check the
Great.
chat.
Great. So Inez, Donzel, Jared, Stephanie, Lisa, Mia, Phil, Regina.
Okay, so it seems that everyone who's present has voted yes.
That's what I have. Thank you. Okay, we will forward her recommendation to the mayor for consideration. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And now we'll move on to the speaking part of the agenda. The topic for tonight is community preparedness. I forgot to change the title. This is the title from last month was Resilient Cities, Resilient Communities. This month is floodplain or watershed planning. And I will kick it off with sharing the connection of the topic to the plans. We also have our coastal planner, Grace Hansen, who will provide an overview of floodplain management in Baltimore. We have Lauren Chizik, who is the executive director of the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation, sharing information on the Fells Point flood mitigation guidelines that have been developed several years ago. We have from Blue Water Baltimore, Alice Volpita, who is the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper, sharing information about their work. And then we will have Grace wrap it up with sharing some information about some watershed planning tools. Next slide. So going into the connection of this topic to the sustainability plan, the climate action plan, and the disaster preparedness plan. These are the kind of the three main plans that guide the work of the Office of Sustainability and the Sustainability Commission. The sustainability plan takes a broad view of sustainability and is guided by 5 themes and 23 topics covering things ranging from neighbors and neighborhoods to transportation to urban agriculture, and includes topics that relate directly to watershed management. And I'll share that in more detail in a little bit. We have the city's climate action plan, which helps us identify ways for the city and residents to contribute to meeting climate action goals and becoming zero carbon city by 2045. And then we also have the 2023 Disaster Preparedness and Planning Project, which we call the DP3, and that is identifying the different natural and human hazards that Baltimore is potentially at risk for, and ways for the city to prepare and plan for how to manage and recover from those types of hazards. Next slide. So with the sustainability plan, out of the 23 topic areas, there are 2 primary ones that relate most strongly to watershed planning. That's our water and the environment chapter and the community preparedness chapter. But watershed planning also relates broadly to several other topics in the plan, including environmental literacy, as far as understanding how our watersheds relate to sustainability and resilience overall. Also waste and recycling, as far as how we manage waste and how that relates to our watersheds. And then all of the different topics under people and nature, how people use our watersheds for recreation and how they support habitat, how they relate to our tree and forest canopy, and how they serve as green infrastructure. Next slide. And then related to the DP3, watershed planning is extremely relevant in the DP3. The DP3 identifies climate hazards such as more intense and frequent rainfall, flooding, sea level rise as various hazards that Baltimore may experience, and then also identifies mitigation strategies broken into 4 different categories. And so watershed management relates to each of these categories. Infrastructure, as far as how we manage water and how the various hazards impact infrastructure. Also buildings and how our buildings use water and how our buildings also can be made more resilient. Natural systems related again to green infrastructure and managing quantity and quality of water, and then public services and how those are managed to both steward our watersheds and make sure that our city services are resilient. Next. And so I'm going to turn it over to Grace Hansen, who is going to provide an overview of our floodplain management program.
Thanks, Amy. So good evening, everyone. I am Grace Hansen. I am the city's coastal planner. Joe Birch, the floodplain manager, was unable to make it this evening, so I am taking over this presentation. So bear with me, as she is the expert in this kind of field. Oh, sorry, wrong screen. Okay, so we are going to discuss some of the floodplain management in Baltimore City, some of our higher regulatory standards, the National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system, and a little bit about our watershed master plans. So within Baltimore City, we have the coastal and the riverine floodplains. I handle the coastal floodplain, which is south of this red line you see on your screen. Joe handles everything north and west of the red line on your screen. We are a part of the environmental permits team under Amy Gilder-Busati. It includes myself, Joe, and Rachel Whitehart, who is the forest conservation planner. We also have the critical area within the coastal zone. So I handle coastal floodplain review as well as Chesapeake Bay critical area review. So some of our higher regulatory standards are the additional 2 feet of freeboard that we require. So essentially you have the base flood elevation. We can say it's 5 feet for easy purposes. And you want the first floor of your home or building to be above that base flood elevation. So we require the first floor to be built 2 feet above. The National Flood Insurance Program, which is the model ordinance we must follow, only regulates the base flood elevation. They don't require freeboard. So this is considered a higher standard. We also regulate the 1% and the 0.2% annual chance floodplains to the same standard. They're also called the 100-year and the 500-year storms. The 500-year covers a broader area because it is technically like a bigger storm. So we mandate that everyone that has properties within that 0.2% or 500-year storm abide by floodplain regulations. This is also a higher standard because FEMA only requires the 1% to be regulated. We also have cumulative substantial improvement. This is over a 6-year period. So this means if the estimated cost of construction on your building is over 50% of the market value of the structure only, it will trigger substantial improvement and the entire building must be brought to floodplain code. This is over a 6-year period. I believe FEMA's standard is 1 year. So we're a little bit higher. So, an extra layer of precaution in the city. And we also are looking into adopting the crab tool. This is not something to eat a crab with. This is called the Climate Ready Action Boundary. It's actually a state requirement that went into effect on September 1st, 2020, and it requires state projects over $500,000 for construction or state funding to apply the corresponding horizontal limits of the crab boundary. This accounts for the 100-year storm floodplain boundary, which is identified by FEMA, plus 3 vertical feet of water, which will account for sea level rise. The model demonstrates where the water will move across the landscape based on the land elevation profile. So Joe and I are working on some floodplain updates. So this is something we are going to hopefully include in our code. And the Maryland Department of Environment Model Floodplain Ordinance recommends adopting the crab tool as well. So extra support there. So this is more Joe's area of expertise. I'm going to do my best to explain this to everyone. So we have the community rating system, which is part of the National Flood Insurance Program. This is managed by FEMA, and it's designed to incentivize communities to go beyond the National Flood Insurance Program's minimum requirements. The goals of the program are to reduce flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the NFIP, encourage comprehensive floodplain management, and communities that participate in the CRS can receive discounts on flood insurance premiums for residents. It's a point-based system, so based on the number of points a community earns through different floodplain management activities, it's assigned a class rating between classes 10 to 1. 1 is the best class and receives the highest amount of discount on flood insurance premiums. Baltimore City is currently a class 5 with a 25% discount on flood insurance premiums for policyholders, and we're working on getting to a class 4. So there are 19 communities in Maryland. Baltimore is one of them and is one of the few class 5 communities in the state. I don't believe there are currently any class 4 communities, so we are one of the highest in the state. We have 2,331 policies holders worth $1.5 million. Most points towards the city's CRS class ranking come from the following activities, including Activity 330, which is outreach projects, 410, open space preservation, 430, higher regulatory standards, and 510, floodplain management planning. Joe would be able to go a little bit more in depth if you have any questions about those, as we have re-verification and reclassification or something like that. One of them is every year and the other is every 5 years, I believe. So Joe handles all of that documentation. So we also are working on watershed master plans for the city. Last year, the office was awarded over $100,000 from Maryland DNR to write 2 watershed master plans that cover the Gwens Falls and the Baltimore Harbor watersheds. Watershed master plans essentially provide a tool to make decisions that will reduce increased flooding from development on a watershed-wide basis. They also address existing flooding problems. Plans also assess impacts of sea level rise and climate change, as well as identifying opportunities to preserve natural areas, and it makes specific mitigation recommendations. The watershed master plans are also a prerequisite for achieving that class 4 under that community rating system. So in the class 4, in order to receive full credit for this, you have to have 50% or greater of the watersheds in the region or the community. That's why we chose the Gwens Falls and the Baltimore Harbor watersheds, because I believe it covers 53% of the city, which will allow us to get that class 4. So this past summer, we had a Yale conservation scholar, Caitlin Lizazzo from Cal Berkeley. I believe she's going into her sophomore year. She created an outline for the watershed master plan during her time with the office, and she looked at several plans across the nation and took notes on data collection, funding and budgeting, green infrastructure components, and a bunch more. This is a great start for the watershed analyst that we hope will begin in the next few weeks. So We've been working closely with our HR team to onboard this person. They have accepted the offer and we're working on the onboarding process now. So hopefully by the next commission meeting, we will have some great news and they will be able to introduce themselves. So another key topic I want to bring up is the nuisance flood plan. This is required by state law. It began in 2020 and stated all jurisdictions in Maryland that experience tidal flooding to complete a plan. It's due for an update every 5 years. So it is due October 1st of this year, and I have been working on that. And I will get into that a little bit more later this evening, with my second presentation. But some of these are some flood mitigation strategies in Baltimore City that we have. The photo on your screen is aquarium glass. I cannot recall where exactly this is, but I know it is a riverine area. But this is a higher regulatory standard and it allows this building to, be safe from flooding while also being able to inhabit like floor space that's below the base flood elevation. So this is a unique strategy. FEMA did an audit last year on our floodplain management, and they said they had never seen this before, or if they have, very few times. So they really liked this strategy. This is also an automatic floodgate, which is great because it does not require human intervention in the event of a flood. So floodwaters automatically trigger it and it will close the wall. Not sure where this is. These are all Joe's photos, so just want to share them with you guys. And then this one is the Elms in Fells Point. This is wet flood proofing. So these are flood vents that allow water to move freely in and out of the space underneath to account for hydrostatic pressure and prevent collapse essentially of the building. So this is just a neat looking flood vent. You don't typically see these kinds of vents across the city. And that is all from me. So thank you. And I believe I am passing it to Lauren next. I'm also happy to take any questions. I don't know if you prefer at the end or now.
I think we have time now.
Okay.
It looks like Stephanie has a hand up. I'm not sure if that's from earlier, if that's for a question.
That is a legacy hand. I will put it down.
Okay, well, I guess given that, I'll go ahead and share my presentation. Are you all seeing, let's see. Oh, okay, I see what I'm sharing, but I'm trying to see if I can share the actual slideshow. Okay, there we go. Well, I really appreciate being invited to speak to the Sustainability Commission. This project that we developed was almost a decade ago, which is wild, was done in collaboration with our colleagues in sustainability. And the idea for it actually was born out of the Office of Sustainability. So I'm going to focus on our Fells Point flood mitigation guidelines. And just so you know, I'm sort of going to be riffing off of a presentation that I've given to, folks actually across the country about our work, where I also sort of do a high level overview of the, sustainability and floodplain regulations that we have in Baltimore, which are frankly very unique and stronger than in many other places. So, as you know, Baltimore is no stranger to flooding incidents, whether it's tidal flooding from Baltimore's Inner Harbor. This is the impact of Hurricane Isabel in 2003, or, riverine and rivers and waterways along the Jones Falls. This is a flood from 2017, and it's the same storm that damaged Ellicott City for the first time. And, as you also know, there's also a lot of nuisance flooding in Baltimore. These are some photos from May 2020 in Fells Point. I'm not going to go over all of the wonderful, documents and resources that Baltimore City has put together, but it is important because that's sort of the trigger for the plans that we came up with today. So in the 2016, in the original DP3, it laid out 8 strategies regarding historic resources. And so that gave us the opportunity to then be able to go for some grant money. With the support, Baltimore City Department of Planning, with the support of the Maryland Historical Trust, received a grant from the Department of the Interior, the National Park Service's Cultural Resources Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, to enable us to begin to address 3 of the plan's historic resources strategies. What's interesting is that sort of at the same time, the Park Service was working on their own guidelines on flood adaptation for rehabilitating historic buildings. And this was ultimately published after hours. It was a much bigger document. But one of the things that I still have a critique of is that it does not do a very good job addressing buildings that are connected, which is the majority of what we have here in Baltimore City. And so our guidelines really are innovative in that way, in that, there's so many cities and so many places, particularly along the East Coast, where we have buildings that are connected. Philly, Wilmington, New York City, so many properties. And the federal, National Park Service guidelines regarding flooding in historic places with connecting buildings really are insufficient at this point. So even though our guidelines are almost 10 years old, they're still a bit more forward thinking than unfortunately our colleagues at the federal level, who, to be fair, have to deal with so many other types of resources. But we're the experts in our environment, right? So the product of this grant funded effort is this document, which we published in 2018, which is geared towards the general public. So the owners of residential and commercial historic properties, specifically in the Fells Point neighborhood. So, and the focus on the Fells Point neighborhood was in part due to the limitations of the grant, but it sort of works as a microcosm of the city. So we hired Dominique Hawkins of Preservation Design Partnership, LLC of Philadelphia, who also, she had extensive design experience helping historic preservation commissions develop or update their design guidelines. She's also an architect. She is just absolutely phenomenal. So we worked very closely with her and with our colleagues in the sustainability division to develop this text. And of course, as you know, this is why we're focusing on Fells Point. It is one of the most vulnerable neighborhoods to flooding. And it is also one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city as well. It has buildings from the 1700s and 1800s, intact historic streetscapes, and it's defined by its relationship to the water. Shipbuilding, it has a deep port, canning industry. Fells Point and water are just, they're synonymous with each other. So it's one of the neighborhoods that would be most impacted by the flooding. But again, the design guidelines that we developed for this can sort of it can be applied to other parts of the city as well. It's not unique to Fells Point. So it made it, the task was manageable. And again, like I said, because the majority of the building typology in Fells Point and frankly the city at large are row houses, we had to develop different ideas and solutions for how to address flooding in a local historic district that is facing flooding. So I'm just going to run through it very quickly because, of course, in Fells Point, folks are going to have to get approval from, our team and Office of Sustainability with the floodplain regs and with CHAP, our office, because it's in a local historic district. And, I'm a strong believer that, being a historic building should not mean that a building should be not have to meet the floodplain regulations, or vice versa, right? That, if we don't uphold the regulations on both ends, it means that we're willing to sacrifice the building, and the resource. And we don't need to do that. Like, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have been able to do that successfully. So just a quick run through our guidelines. We just have these sections. And, there's a lot of terminology. And in this case, we have terminology that has to do with floodplain, and flood mitigation, and with historic preservation, two very technical, types of language. And so we, did a lot of definitions, and we had to define a lot of acronyms. And again, our goal was to try to make this as accessible as possible. And, the guidelines sort of break the types of flood mitigation efforts that one might undertake into two categories: basic improvements and building alterations. And basic improvements are things that, are just simple maintenance, repointing the deteriorating mortar on your walls, making sure your downspout doesn't drain, at the base of your house, clearing vegetation, very simple stuff. And then it goes on to show other types of basic improvements, like the relocation of critical systems above the base flood elevation, or installing secondary power sources. More expensive, but again, still relatively easy to do. But then, when flood mitigation is triggered by substantial building alterations, it gets more complicated. And so you can see in this example, how do you continue to live in a house that is going to basically, be limited in terms of living to, say, the second floor? You may not be able to use the first floor for habitation, right? It could maybe only be used for storage. So looking at if this is going to be the case, if we want people to live in these historic houses in Fells Point for as long as is feasibly possible, how do we allow for that to happen? And so thinking about, how could, giving people tools, how do they know, how to infill, how to raise interior floors, potentially building potential additions on the rear that are set back so that they don't impact the character of the streetscape, but allow for additional living space, because people are going to have to functionally abandon 2 of their 3 floors, right? Thinking about how to do that. This is an example, actually, of that happening. This was at the time of the renovation. The house was missing a rear wall. The contemporary rear addition includes a roof deck, a balcony, garage opening. The basement has been infilled, and the first floor uses are limited to an entrance, a garage, and a storage space. So again, they can only functionally live on the second and third floors, but they made it work. It's also easier because it's like a much, it's not a two-story house, but it's still an example of how this can be put into practice. I'm going to just skip through these, but these are some examples again of Meadow Mill where the dry flood proofing is, if it has to be done manually, it's not going to work well, because you're going to need people to go out there in the middle of the night to install the barriers, and that just doesn't happen. And I just want to show one quick example. The Sagamore Pendry Hotel, shown here, is a combination of rehabilitation and new construction on the Fells Point Rec Pier. It's literally, it is taking a building that is literally in the water and making it floodproof. And so it's, I think, a really good example of, showing the considerable lengths that a developer could go to achieve floodproofing. And again, these first floor windows are all aquarium glass. And it's just an incredible project from an engineering standpoint. It's also incredibly expensive, and, we think it's amazing, but we also wanted to be sure that our guidelines were developed for, the homeowner, for the small business owner, for folks who are going to have to, who don't have access to that kind of, money and resources. So, we learned some lessons in this process, that weighing historic preservation and life safety is always the most important, period. The resources matter, but the people matter more. And that our idea in developing this was to figure out how to help people live in their homes for as long as possible. We may not have these neighborhoods forever, just because of the change in our climate. It just may not be possible. But how can we be as good stewards to both people and the built environment for as long as possible? And the only way we can do that is through collaboration. So that's all from me. Any questions for me?
While we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I just also wanted to comment as another a staff member who works with Lauren and her team frequently. We really appreciate the work that goes in on both sides as far as working together to achieve common goals and not be in conflict with one another, because the goal is to
we'll check in, see what's up.
retain the character of our neighborhoods and keep people safe, and recognize that those don't need to be in opposition to each other.
Even if people sometimes try to make them in opposition to each other and make it be posed as an impossible thing to do, we manage to make it all work.
Hi, Lauren. This is Jeffrey Holland.
Yeah, hi.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated your comment about, we don't have to excuse old buildings. There's technology, there's proven, ways to make a building exist in its historic glory and still be, resilient and able to take a flood. I mean, the Netherlands. So, it's time that we stop allowing excuses to hamstring us. And it was great to hear you say that we have other ways to take care of this problem and still maintain our history.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the push comes to shove part yet. We've certainly, CHAP has been involved in projects where, we have had to deal with these things, but we haven't had to do it on a really big scale yet. But I'm hopeful that when we get there, we will have even more tools and options available in our hands.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the members of the commission? Okay, it doesn't seem like there are any questions. Thank you so much for joining, Lauren.
Thanks again. And again, appreciate the teamwork and partnership with Office of Sustainability. You guys do phenomenal work.
Thanks. And then next we have Alice Filippetta. Ava, if you can make her a co-host or a presenter, she can share slides. She's the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper with Blue Water Baltimore.
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name is Alice. Like Amy said, I'm the Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper here with Blue Water Baltimore. So I'm going to be talking a little bit today about our organization and my role as Waterkeeper. And then I'll also be talking a little bit about the water quality monitoring program that we have in Baltimore's waterways and sort of some long-term trends that we've been able to pull out of our data over the course of over about 15 years now. Oops. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen now? Yes, okay, fantastic. So, like I said, I'm with Blue Water Baltimore, and we are a watershed organization located in the Oliver neighborhood of Baltimore City. We formed as a merger of 5 different watershed organizations or waterkeeping organizations in 2010. So 2015 or 2025 marks our 15-year anniversary, which is really exciting. And over time, I think our mission has shifted a little bit and our approach to the work has shifted, but at the core, it's always been about clean water and strong communities. So we are really trying to create a clean water movement that's rooted in accountability. And we take a holistic approach to the issues of water quality and strong communities in Baltimore. And so that means that we do everything from trash cleanups to tree planting events. We advocate for stronger laws for clean water. We have a robust monitoring program that I'll talk a little bit about more in just a few minutes. We also operate a pollution reporting hotline. And so one of the big things that we do is train folks throughout Baltimore region to identify different types of pollution and train them how to properly report those types of pollution to Baltimore City, Baltimore County, MDE, sometimes EPA if it's an environmental crime or it raises to that level. And then we also exercise our rights under the Clean Water Act to hold polluters accountable when illegal discharges are happening into our shared local waterways. We also operate the Herring Run Nursery, which if you haven't checked it out, please do. It's over in the Mount Pleasant Golf Course, and it's really fantastic. The Fall Fest for Herring Run Nursery is coming up on, I want to say October 18th. It's coming up in October. And then we'll probably start winding down for the season after that, but there's still time to plant. Now is a good time to plant. So my role as Baltimore Harbor Waterkeeper is multifaceted. So for those of you who haven't heard about the Waterkeeper movement, it's a movement of water watchdogs all over the world. There's over 350 waterkeepers, and there's a whole lot of us in the Chesapeake region because there's a whole lot of waterways that need protecting in the Chesapeake region. And so our licensed jurisdiction through the Waterkeeper Alliance is the entirety of the Patapsco and the Back River watersheds. So that's the footprint of where all of Blue Water Baltimore's work happens. And I would say that the work of a waterkeeper is really a mixture of science, policy, and the law. And it's all designed to protect and restore our local waterways. So we take our lead from what we're finding on the ground in terms of our water quality monitoring program. We keep tabs on what's happening in our waterways, but then also from the lived experiences of the community members that we're working with. And then we take those two things together and we figure out how we can influence local policy or enforcement actions really to clean up our shared local waterways. I'll talk a bit more about our water quality monitoring program in just a moment. A couple of key pieces of policy that we worked on relatively recently in the past. In Maryland General Assembly, we helped to advocate for the Maryland Clean Water Justice Act just last year or maybe 2 years ago. Can't remember. Everything blends together. But that measure was really designed to reinstate some of the local waterway protections that were stripped from a federal level as a result of the Sackett versus EPA decision that recategorized many different waterways in Maryland and beyond. We're also advocating for a bottle bill, which would tackle trash pollution at the source. And we have all sorts of different policy initiatives that we're working on as well. And then from a legal perspective, a couple of the big wins or big cases that Blue Water Baltimore has been involved in the recent past was our successful enforcement action against the Fleischmann's Vinegar Company, where they were illegally discharging acid vinegar into the Jones Falls. And we documented some really huge and devastating fish kills after finding all that acid in the water. And then also we are a plaintiff in the wastewater treatment plant lawsuit that held Baltimore City accountable for the illegal discharges that were happening at the Patapsco and Back River wastewater treatment plants. So we're also involved in the sewer collection system consent decrees and the industrial stormwater general permit. We have some work there. There's all sorts of stuff, and it's all focused on ensuring cleaner waterways for everybody. So this is a map of our monitoring grid that we currently have throughout Baltimore's waterways. So each one of these little dots that you're seeing on this map of the Baltimore region is one of our monitoring stations. So in this map, the big yellow splotch, that's the lower part of the non-tidal Patapsco watershed. Unfortunately, we don't currently have any monitoring stations there, but we do have 14 monitoring stations in the Gwynns Falls watershed, which is orange here, 13 stations in the Jones Falls watershed, which is red. We have 24 monitoring stations in the tidal Patapsco River and its tributaries, which is kind of like, it's the purpley splotch, but it's all the tidal waterways down there. And then new for this year, we've also added 9 monitoring stations in the Herring Run watershed, which is really exciting. It's something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and we finally were able to secure funding to do that. So all of these different monitoring stations, 60 of them in total, we keep track of baseline water health so that we can figure out how healthy or sick your local waterways are. And then we can take our lead from there and figure out what to do about it. So all of this data is available for free to the public online at baltimorewaterwatch.org. You can download our full suite of data from 2010 all the way through 2025, or you can see maps of the most recent current conditions. So you can see in this picture right here, down in the lower left-hand corner, we're toggled to the bacteria monitoring that we do. And so the different colors of the monitoring stations that you can see on this map relate to swimming thresholds. So that means that according to the Code of Maryland Regulations or Maryland state law, bacteria levels have to be a certain level in order to be considered safe for recreation or less risky for recreation. And so any dot on this map that's green means that at that certain time that we took a bacteria sample at that location on that day, it fell below that threshold, which is a good thing. And if it's red, it means it was over that threshold, which is a bad thing. It means that you're more likely to get sick in some way or contract some sort of illness by coming into contact with the water because it has too much bacteria in the water. And so we take measurements of a lot of different parameters of water health to get a full picture of how we're doing. Is this waterway healthy or sick? So it's not just about bacteria. That's a big one for public health, but there's a lot more than that. It's about dissolved oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. It's about chlorophyll or algae blooms in the water, and pH and water clarity and water temperature. There's all sorts of different measurements. Think of it sort of like the different measurements that you get taken when you go and have a physical at your doctor's, right? So like your heartbeat, your body temperature, your cholesterol levels, things like that. So like every component that can be tested that tells you, are you healthy or are you sick? That's what we're doing with our local waterways. So every year we roll up all of that data that we collect. And over the past 15 years, we've collected over 193,000 individual data points, which is really incredible. And we turn all of that data into an individual overall score. So is the Gwynns Falls as a region getting healthier or sicker over time? Same for Jones Falls, the entirety of the Patapsco, and then zoomed into the Baltimore Harbor. And so this is a map of all of the different overall ecosystem scores that we have been tracking since 2013 in all of our different regions. And you can think of this score sort of like a GPA. If each one of those different parameters that we were testing, chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, which is water clarity, if all of those are individual class scores, you roll them all up into an overall GPA, and that's what you're looking at here. And so what we've seen over the course of the past 10 years, as we're looking at this data, is that the overall scores in the Gwynns Falls, tidal Patapsco River, and then the subset of Baltimore Harbor stations are all generally on the decline. And so that means each individual station might have different scores, but on a regional scale, so like those big regions, we're seeing declining overall health at each of those three watersheds. The Jones Falls is showing a very weak improving trend, which is great news. And so like we can say, sure, I'm seeing a declining trend, but what does that really mean? Like, let's take it back to the class example, right? So if I'm doing really good in gym class and math, but I'm doing really, really badly at reading, for example, I might have an overall C grade, but you have to get into those individual class scores to figure out, okay, I'm not doing great at reading. I need a reading tutor. So that will tell you what the intervention is or where we go from here. So I know this is a lot. This is a lot of data that you're looking at right here, but the takeaways that I want to share with you right now in the Baltimore Harbor, when you look at each individual parameter over time, we're seeing improvements in nitrogen, water clarity, and bacteria levels, which is really great news for all of those things. And unfortunately, we're seeing declining health in dissolved oxygen, total phosphorus, and chlorophyll A, or the algae in the water. So I'll bring it back to what this all means in just a moment. I'm going to move through these. In the Gwynns Falls watershed, again, we're seeing improvements in nitrogen and bacteria. That's great news. We're seeing worsening health in turbidity or water clarity, conductivity, which is a measurement of the salts in our streams, not just the kind of salt that you put on your food, but like all kinds of different types of salts. And then declining scores in total phosphorus. And a similar story in the Jones Falls, which is that turbidity, nitrogen, and bacteria are all getting better over time. Some of them just barely. I mean, some of these trend lines are like, okay, there is no pattern, right? So if we have an R-squared value of 0.00002, there really is no pattern. It just means that we're staying stagnant over time, really. But we're getting worse, unfortunately, just a little bit in conductivity. And then we are seeing potentially a true pattern in phosphorus levels. Okay, so like, what does that all actually mean, though? So let me see if I can stop sharing for just a moment. So what this is telling us really is that the parameters that we were seeing improvements in, those bacteria levels and the nitrogen levels, those are the things that are really closely associated with sanitary sewer overflows. And so it seems like the work that the city and the county is doing to improve sewage overflows is actually working over time. And then on the flip side, the parameters most closely associated with polluted stormwater runoff seem to be getting worse over time. And I like to think about this sort of like the Red Queen effect, because we're seeing improvements and we're seeing declines over time, but all of those trends, as you saw, are really weak. So over the course of 10, 15 years, what we're really seeing is not a whole lot of like ground shaking movement. And so the Red Queen effect, it comes from the book Through the Looking Glass, and it comes from a quote from the Red Queen where the Queen and Alice are running as fast as they can through Wonderland. But then Alice looks up after running, for so long, and she looks around and she notices the scenery hasn't changed around her at all. And the quote is, "It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place." And so for me, that is appropriate for what we're seeing here in our data, because we have spent billions of dollars in green and gray infrastructure over the years to improve water quality. But the persistent decay of our underground infrastructure, coupled with the pressures of climate change, especially in Baltimore and the Mid-Atlantic region, have really prevented us from seeing real progress on an ecological watershed-wide scale. So what I mean by that is that for all the money that we've put into the system, it would be so much worse if we hadn't done that. But because of these ever-changing external pressures, we really need to double down on our efforts. And so the takeaways from all of this is that we need to double down on green stormwater infrastructure investments and make it easier to voluntarily install those projects to create a greener, spongier urban ecosystem. We need to adequately fund sewer infrastructure projects and the maintenance costs to keep our systems in good working order. And we need to keep doing this monitoring program, because at the end of the day, you can see that one weird year, for example, in 2018, we had 72 inches of rain when a normal year is like 40 inches of rain. So one weird year can really knock you off track, and it takes a long time to really get an accurate picture of what's truly happening. So we need to keep doing this monitoring. And then finally, we need to pass legislation that eliminates trash pollution at the source, gives community members the means to hold polluters accountable, and strengthens laws for cleaner water. And so that's a lot, and sometimes it can feel very, out of reach, because the true fixes seem to be like on a very high policy driven level, but there's things that individual people can do too. And so what I mostly tell people, because I work for Blue Water Baltimore, is I tell them to try to get connected with Blue Water Baltimore as much as you can to support the type of work that we're trying to do. And so what that really functionally means is signing up to volunteer with us to plant more trees and improve tree canopy in Baltimore and buy natives and plant natives. Signing up for our newsletter to get action alerts for upcoming advocacy opportunities. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is our 15-year anniversary. And so we're having a big celebration at True Chesapeake on October 25th. And we would love to have anybody here come and join us. That's our event called Evening on the Falls. And you can find more about it at bluewaterbaltimore.org. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We do a ton more than what I talked about, but I ran out of time. So thank you for having me, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much. And I tried to, during the presentation, put a few of the links that you mentioned into the chat. I put the link for Herring Run Nursery and Baltimore Water Watch. But if there are any other links that you'd want to share for people to sign up for volunteering or how to report pollution, that I'm sure people would love to get, any resources you can share.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amy.
Denzel?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. And I just want to ask if we have a conversation as soon as possible. We are working with the Smithsonian on Chesapeake Water Watch, and we are doing collection sites. And I'd like to have some data sharing between our two organizations, the Smithsonian and NASA, who we're working with, and particularly our focus is around the middle branch of South Baltimore. So I don't know how much collection you do that, but I'd like to have that conversation separately for this. But appreciate everything that you guys do at Blue Water, and yeah, let's have a conversation.
Denzel, I'm going to email you right now.
All right, great.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions.
I have another question just because I know it relates to, so Alice, typically the commission will do a legislative preview discussion closer to the start of the session, usually in December. And so I wasn't sure if you have any like legislation that you're aware of or anticipate supporting or encouraging people to support coming up in the next year.
Yes, and it's not a comprehensive list because these conversations have like really just started. So, for example, like Citizens Campaign for the Environment hasn't yet voted on priorities, things like that. A couple that I know that Blue Water Baltimore will likely be involved in are the bottle bill again. So the bottle bill was able to move further through General Assembly last year than it ever has before, which is really exciting. So there's some really good movement, momentum behind it. We'll likely be supporting that again. There's a PFAS and biosolids bill that we've been tracking and are really interested in, particularly because this is a bill all about protecting communities from PFAS in treated wastewater, basically, if it gets applied to farm fields. And so a lot of that sludge, a lot of the biosolids that are being pelletized by Synagro and then being applied to farm fields elsewhere actually originate from Baltimore. So this is an issue that's definitely on my mind, and I want to be tracking that. And then I know I'm missing a big one. Can't think of it right now. But I'm happy to share more resources as we get closer to session, for sure.
Zell, is your hand still up from earlier, or did you have another question?
Oh, my apologies. It was up from earlier.
Alice, thank you for your time. I really appreciate this presentation. And of course, if you can maybe put your information in chat so that people can reach out to you. And of course, the links were placed in there by Amy, but if someone has some direct questions, that'd be great. And then I'm going to hand it back to Grace, I think.
Yes, that is correct. All right, let me make sure I can share the right screen. All right, so you should be seeing the presentation, not the notes. Is that correct? Okay, great. So hello again. Just as a reminder, I'm Grace Hansen. I'm the Coastal Planner with the Office of Sustainability. So tonight I'm going to be talking about the DNR MyCoast project, as well as the Maryland Coastal Flood Explorer tool. So tonight we're starting with the MyCoast. We're going to look at some reports across Baltimore City. We'll touch a little bit more in depth on the nuisance flood plan, and then I'll wrap things up with the Maryland Coastal Flood Explorer tool. So coastal flooding is the root of this MyCoast tool. Coastal flooding is caused by high tides, rising tides, or storm surge. 3% of Baltimore City's overall land, primarily in the Inner Harbor and historic Fells Point, is within the coastal floodplain. The MyCoast web tool, as well as the smartphone app, was created in 2019. It's an initiative within Maryland DNR's Chesapeake and Coastal Service. It's a citizen science tool, which is a type of monitoring that allows non-professionals to participate in scientific research that contributes to data monitoring, collection, and analysis. Users share photos to document on-the-ground impacts of flooding and damage that are attributed to rain, storms, or high tides. This helps local planners across the state determine how often a community is flooding and where, which can help identify and prioritize climate change, resilience, and restoration opportunities. The server automatically connects to the nearest NOAA tide gauge and collects weather information to add context to the photo that the user uploads. So here is a photo of some of the reports across the state. It's not, like it can be places that don't experience just tidal flooding, because you can do pluvial flooding or flooding from rainfall events as well as other storms. So that's why you'll see some of our neighbors in Western Maryland have some reports. But it looks like Baltimore has, around 129. So people have been using it. I know I use it when I walk around, and hopefully you can use this next time you're out. So on the smartphone app as well as the website, you can filter from the state reports. So like I just showed you that map, you can break it down by community as well as county. For the purposes of this tool, it's important to use the community filter and select Baltimore City or Baltimore, Maryland on here, because for the county, Baltimore County and City are lumped together. That has not been fixed. That's a bug that has been there for a while. So unfortunately, I could not fix it myself. So getting into some of the reports that people in the harbor and surrounding areas have shared. This photo is along the promenade. It was taken 38 minutes before high tide on September 20th, 2024. And the high tide was 2.8 feet, which is basically means it was 2.8 feet higher than the average sea level. So obviously we have those lower portions of the promenade. They get flooded, it seems more often than not these days, attributed to rising tides. But yeah, so this was September 20th. I don't believe this was a king tide, which is a higher tide. It was just a slightly higher than average normal tide for that day. This was a major flood event or a major coastal storm in January 9th of 2024. This particular photo was in Fells Point in the Inner Harbor. It was taken about 6 hours before high tide, and water levels were 3.17 feet above the mean higher high water level. So you have two tides every day, and you have the average of those high tides. So this was 3.17 feet above the average that Baltimore experiences. Oh, and just I wanted to add that the report is a little geotagged. So if you're seeing this little icon on your screen, this is the general location of where that photo and report was taken. This was also the same coastal storm event from January 9th, 2024. This was taken 7.5 hours before high tide. And then flooding was not just in the city, it was all across Maryland for this. I believe it was a nor'easter event. So it was very wind driven as well as high tide and coupled with rain as well. So like I mentioned earlier, it's not just for high tide flooding. You can also do rainfall events, which are pluvial flooding events. This is particularly in the 1700 block of North Dukeland. This was taken July 2nd, 2022. For pluvial events, it ties to the nearest stream gauge. So this one was the Gwens Falls at Washington Boulevard. I think the closest one is down here in the corner. I could be wrong, but it was about 2 to 3 miles away from the general location. And it showed that the river gauge or the stream gauge was 4 feet above regular water levels. So they had some significant flooding in the backyard of their home, and they did have a report of, I believe, around $1,000 worth of damage. So how this is all useful to planners, not just interesting photos of what's going on, but it's important for our plans. So we have nuisance flooding, which is defined as coastal flooding. It's minor tidal flooding that occurs at high tide and is often associated with minor impacts like seawalls being overtopped, low-lying areas with roads inundated, There's also stormwater systems that have water coming in through the outtake pipes. That's a very common issue in Baltimore City. And it's not widespread or damaging, but it causes short-term public inconveniences, like not being able to walk on the promenade or flooded roads, for instance. It's often referred to as high tide flooding or sunny day flooding. So like I mentioned a little bit ago, Maryland law required all jurisdictions to have that plan by October 1st if you experience nuisance flooding. So I'm still working on the update. It's due October 1st, so I just wanted to give some reports and show how the data is being used to update this plan. So this map shows 6 flood zones that were identified in the 2020 nuisance flood plan. These are outlined, 1 through 6 in these polygons you're looking at. They're not equal, but they kind of show where in the city nuisance flooding occurs according to 2020 data. The MyCoast reports that I just went through, those are in pink. So there are quite a bit that are concentrated around the Inner Harbor. From this, it looks like the flood zones were pretty accurate. And then, yeah, I zoomed in a little bit here so you could see where these reports are in relation to the flood zone. So it looks like they were drawn pretty accurately from this standpoint. Let me make sure, was that the right one? Yeah, sorry, okay. So zone 5 was, so I transformed it into shaded polygons for this region. This was 311 data that was overlaid with the 2020 zones. So the 311 data was storm-related flooded streets. So we were able to pinpoint, the GIS team was able to pinpoint the 311 calls on the map using latitude and longitude. And from here, we can see that our flood zones may not be that accurate from 311 data, but we are going to overlay this with the DPW storm drain and inlet system to see if we have a better picture of what is going on, if these are more stormwater events, are they coastal flooding events, and so on. We just have not been able to upload that to this map yet. So the second tool I would like to talk about today is the Maryland Coastal Flood Explorer. This is a tool that came out about 2 months ago, and it's very valuable for visualizing predicted flood levels in Maryland's coastal zone. This Explorer presents predicted, historic, and current flood depths, and it's created from locally collected elevation data. The application was created through a partnership with NOAA, University of Maryland Sea Grant Extension, University of Maryland College Park, and Salisbury University's Eastern Shore Regional GIS Cooperative. So this is the current map of what conditions we have in the Inner Harbor today, with a minor high tide flooding event with current sea level rise. So the depth of the water is on your right here. And it shows, a little bit of inundation along the promenade, and we saw that with the MyCoast on a minor flooding day. There's some low-lying areas in the corner here, which is Fells Point. That just shows it's below our expected water level, so it could have some flooding if the tide is normal that day. This is Hurricane Isabel from 2003. The water levels were about 6.5 feet. This was the storm surge, and that's 6.5 feet above the average high tide. Something that's unique to this is you can measure the depth of the water in a certain point. So I measured on Pratt Street, and it looked like it was about 2.3 feet that day during Hurricane Isabel. So obviously not smart to drive through, nor I don't even believe it's passable. But this just shows, this was a major event in Baltimore, and, we're due for one, as well as storms are intensifying. So something to consider moving forward. This is also a good idea for planning purposes. We have the current sea level plus minor flooding, which is 1.74 feet. As you see nowadays, this isn't too bad with current sea level. However, if you couple that with a minor flooding event and 2070 sea level rise scenarios, you'll see a lot of Fells Point is inundated here. So this is good to look at and opportunity to prioritize mitigation strategies as well. So this is another flood zone that was identified in 2020. This is the Fells Point neighborhood. I believe this is particularly zone 3. So the red dots are 311 calls and the yellow dots are MyCoast reports. So the current reports are concentrated around areas that will be inundated in a 2050 moderate high tide scenario. So it's a good opportunity to look for mitigation opportunities in these areas as they are already experiencing flooding during current events. So something to consider in our nuisance flood plan updates, as well as mitigation plans moving forward with our DP3 and watershed master plans. So if you have your phone on you, this is a QR code to the MyCoast website. And I believe it will also link to the app in the App Store. I think it's, Apple and Samsung or whatever other smartphone device. I think Android is the proper name. It'll link to that in their App Store as well. You can also just search MyCoast in the App Store and that will come up. I provided a picture of what it looks like in the App Store. It's this little half rainbow but blue icon here, and you simply download it and then you create a login information. They don't send you any emails or anything like that, but then you select the report that you want to upload for the day, and you take a photo. You can alternate location, you can put some comments down there, and then it sets the pin on the map. So obviously I was not experiencing high tide flooding in Montgomery County at the time of this photo, but that just shows where it is on the map. And that is all I have. So I'm happy to take any questions. Oh, yes, Alice, I can drop a link. Amy, I don't know if you dropped it in the chat already.
So the first one I put in the chat, the MyCoast.
Okay. Yeah, I can do the flood visualizer. Let me pull that up.
There is a comment in chat. I'm not sure if anyone would like to address that.
Yeah, let me take a look. Okay.
So Grace, that might not be one that you can address because it's a partially a DPW thing, but Rachel, if you're on, this might be a good time to share a little bit about upcoming forest conservation updates and how it relates to green infrastructure approvals, if you don't mind being put on the spot.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. So this is regarding the Frederick Avenue conversation or comment?
Yeah, there was a comment about projects to manage stormwater and making voluntary projects easier to get approved. And I know that that's one thing that we're looking at with the forest conservation update as it relates to project reviews.
Yeah. So as Amy said, I am the city's forest conservation program manager. We are working on some code updates. And one of those code updates, a lot of them are sort of thinking about how to make our regulations and protections of trees and forests stronger. But we're also trying to think about how to help better facilitate and incentivize projects that we want to be happening and we don't want our regulations to be standing in the way. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is looking at more voluntary, small scale stormwater projects and how we can exempt those from some of our forest conservation requirements so that we are not adding an additional unnecessary regulatory step to getting those in the ground. And we are planning to reach out to DPW to talk more about that, to see if there are other ways that we can better facilitate that sort of work. But yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely something that we are thinking about on the regulatory side of things.
Yep, and so that's an update that Rachel's been working on, and we'll have more information to be able to share in early 2026. We're hoping that that'll be a bill that'll be introduced to the city council and adopted next year. And thanks, Grace, for putting in the chat the Flood Explorer link.
Any other questions? Lots of great information provided here today, and lots of great things to follow up on and think about as a commission as we're thinking about our legislative agenda in the next few weeks.
So I think that's, if there aren't any other questions for Grace or any of the other speakers, that's the end of our speaking program. Jared and me, I wasn't sure if the commission would want to have any discussion in preparation for November as far as topics that might be of interest for presentations from commission members. And if not, having conversation about that now, I can definitely follow up with commission members by email.
Sure. What I'd love to be able to do is just let everyone know, for those commissioners that'll be rolling off the commission once we have the appointments in place and get the confirmation process moving forward, we want to be able to have an opportunity to really kind of showcase the work, the professional work, and the work that has been done in community by some of our commissioners who have been longstanding commissioners. Some of them have been on the commission since I think since like the commission was initially appointed. And there have been lots of great plans that have gone on, lots of great work. And a lot of that over the years have been highlighted. And we want to have an opportunity to give commissioners that chance to kind of share some of the things that they're most proud of while sharing some of that, just appreciating. And so we'll be reaching out to you directly to be able to see how you want to be able to highlight that work, who might be brought in to be able to kind of help with amplifying that story. And so both Amy and I together will be reaching out to make sure. And so that sounds like it's going to be Inez, Lisa, Ben, Dunzel, and I might be forgetting someone else. I'll be rolling off too. But we want to have some time to make sure that we can just highlight some of that great work as we anticipate a really exciting new cohort of commissioners. We were the first commission that went through equity training, that went through looking at community engagement processes that led to some of the great work that's been done in Baltimore from that point forward, and is codified and will be happening for the foreseeable future. So that is what that November meeting will be about. And so look for a message in your inbox soon. For those that are waiting to be appointed, know that the process is moving forward. And so we hope to have some updates soon. You'll be hearing directly from Amy or Ava with those updates and with scheduling confirmation hearings, and then hopefully appointment and being able to sign your name in the big book. And then I will be back in touch with the December option that we discussed and some great details on that. So I think the next steps for us as a commission is that we will be looking at some legislation that we want to support. So if anyone has anything that they would like to recommend, any commissioners that we should be looking at, I'm hopeful that, we heard some great things that it sounds like the office will be putting forward potentially. We have heard some suggestions and can get some recommendations from Blue Water Baltimore, some of our other partners that we've had present in the past. And then Jared, I'm going to hand it over to you in case you have any other additional thoughts on legislation.
Yeah, I can actually talk about the piece of legislation that I know that I'm working on most closely is the BEPS legislation that came through not long ago. So there have been some recent changes and tweaks to that law, but it's been codified for a while. And I think that, as we brainstorm as a commission, we can actually focus on things that will increase equity and environmental sustainability, but nothing specific. I don't have anything specific.
Okay. And then Ava, did you want to, I know that in the next few weeks, as we're preparing for the October meeting, there might be some items that you'll bring to us. Did you want to give a little preview of the October meeting? I'm really excited about what's being planned.
Absolutely. As a reminder to everyone, we tried to kind of focus on a different issue or subject each quarter of the year. And the next quarter, the last quarter of 2025, is going to focus on environmental justice. For our October meeting, we really want to hone in on vulnerable populations and how we can proactively support protecting and including vulnerable populations in our climate work. And we are hoping to hear from several different groups across the city in terms of their work that they're doing to support older adults, the LGBTQ community, Latino communities across the city, and other vulnerable groups who we know may be at higher risk of climate risk and threats or extreme weather events overall. So we're finalizing our list of speakers, but really hope to have to hear from some of our agency leadership who's doing really great work with various communities across the city. And then also I'm hoping to get the state Maryland Department of Environmental Justice team to share with us their work that's going on. And then aside from that, we'll also be, as Mia mentioned, we want to make sure we hear from all the commissioners about any particular types of legislation to keep on the radar. And so we'll be, if there are specific pieces of legislation that the commission wants to be aware of, we want to make sure prior to the start of the General Assembly, the commission can vote on the types of legislation or at the very least themes to focus on. Some of that will be impacted a little bit because we have that transition coming up. So we are cognizant of that and we want to keep that in mind as well.
So Ava, I did ask if it was possible to get any thoughts before that October meeting so we can kind of pull to get together an agenda in November, December, because our January meeting will happen after will happen after session starts, and we want to be able to kind of get ahead of that. And then Alicia, to answer your question, sure, you can share some thoughts there, but we want to make sure that as we're putting together an agenda that will be voted on, those that will be able to vote and move the agenda forward have some thoughts that are going forward there. And is there anything else that I'm missing that we need to cover business-wise? Okay. I'm looking at faces. It looks like no. And so we will see everyone on Wednesday, October 15th, right here on WebEx. So have a great evening, great rest of the week.